Residents of this neighborhood don't know it yet, but this neighborhood is going to be completely upended over the coming years about new zoning regulations that are taking effect all across British Columbia. Now today we're filming this video in South Surrey, but this is not limited to just South Surrey. This could happen absolutely anywhere across the entire province, primarily in areas that are highly populated. If you're someone who's looking to move to Surrey or anywhere in the Lower Mainland for that matter, or if you're someone who owns property in a neighborhood that looks just like this, where you have streets just like this, you're going to want to watch today's video and learn all about how this neighborhood is going to change over the course of the next few years, maybe for the better, but also maybe for the worse. You need to know how it's going to affect your investment and your quality of life. So if that all sounds good and it sounds like something you probably want to hang around for, make sure you hang around to the end as well, because I'm going to let you know how to figure out if these effects are going to take hold on your property as well, or if you are buying a property in an area that's going to be affected by that. If that all sounds good, well, we better get into it right now. Hey, it's Darren here. If you're thinking of moving to Surrey, White Rock, or any of the surrounding suburbs, subscribe below so you can be the first to learn about the market and the areas. And like so many others, we've helped in the process of buying or selling a home. If you need help in the process, whether it's today or 6 months from now, use the link in the description to book a time to speak with me. We'll help you make sure that your move is the absolute best that it could ever be. Brought in by the BC government was the Homes for Action plan in about April of 2023. And this plan had sweeping changes, massive changes for many neighborhoods, not only in Surrey, but across the Lower Mainland and into other areas of British Columbia. The goal of this plan was to fix restrictive zoning dating back from municipal bylaws created decades ago or even centuries ago, largely facilitating the creation of neighborhoods dominated by two types of structures: single-family homes and large-scale apartment buildings. This type of zoning restricts secondary suites and multifamily residences and creates rules about housing setbacks. Development in our cities has produced primarily towering residential complexes, big concrete towers. These are apartment buildings, and this means that with the lack of detached homes also getting created, detached homes started becoming much more expensive. This failed to supply enough of the small-scale multi-unit homes that add much-needed supply and are more within reach for middle-income families, addressing something called the missing middle. In today's video, we're going to address 3 of the most significant changes that this platform has released, and you're going to want to pay attention because they're going to affect many neighborhoods in your community. We're going to talk exactly about what small-scale multi-unit housing is, how it's going to affect the average property. We're also going to talk about areas of significance called Transit Orientated Areas and the massive implications of living inside them. And lastly, we're going to cover parking minimums, something that I want you to make sure you grasp by the end of this video and how important they are. If you're in an area that is affected by some of these changes, you're going to want to pay attention because it's going to impact your longevity in your property's value, and just your general day-to-day living. And if you're buying as well, you're going to want to pay attention to what neighborhoods you're actually looking in. Substantial redevelopment in these areas, not immediately necessarily, but as an example, 10 years into the future is going to have significant impacts on density, the use of public services, infrastructure, schools, and more. And the neighborhood character of wherever you might be today or considering today is going to substantially change. Now, there's many people that are going to benefit from these changes as well. Generally, it's going to add a lot more space for people to call home, but that comes at the sacrifice of many people as well. The people that bought into these neighborhoods to enjoy them as is, or better said, as was, because they're going to look a lot different. So let's jump into the different types of homes, just so we're all on the same page of exactly what we're talking about. There's primarily 6 different types of homes: a single family dwelling, you're probably familiar with that, a basement suite. We're going to introduce a term called a garden suite. We're also going to talk about a duplex and a term called a houseplex, which effectively is a duplex except with 3 units or 4 units. And lastly, we're going to reference a coach house, which is just simply a dwelling above a garage. Take a look at this backyard. It might seem like just another piece of suburban real estate in Surrey, but under the new zoning regulations, this property could transform in ways that you might not expect. Let's break it down. If your lot is somewhere between 3,000 square feet and an acre in size, like this one, new zoning laws could allow up to 4 dwellings on this property. That's right, 4 dwellings. This could mean a duplex with 2 suites underneath, a single family home with a suite and a garden suite, or even a combination of a single family home, a garden suite, and a coach house. Of course, what you can build will depend on your lot's setbacks and whether you have lane access, but the possibilities are pretty open. Now, keep in mind that in most cases, each of these dwellings would require at least 1 off-street parking space, but we're going to dive into parking a little bit later. Before you get too carried away with your plans for your property though, there's something important that you also need to know. For those of you with existing secondary suites or thinking about adding them or buying a home that has them, the new legislation does allow for the construction of these units. However, it does not provide retroactive legislation for any secondary suite or coach house units built without the necessary building permits. So if you have an unpermitted suite, you'll still need to go through the proper channels to ensure it meets all the building requirements. Also, according to the BC Building Code, each house is only permitted to have 1 secondary suite, and the owner must occupy the house. Both the main dwelling and the suite together are considered a single real estate entity, so no traditional single-family homes with more than 1 suite, and the owner must live in the property. Now it's time to talk about what's called a Transit Orientated Area, or a TOA. And these transit orientated areas, well, they're going to be around all of the SkyTrain stations, not just in Surrey, but specifically for this video, around the 12 SkyTrain stations that are either in Surrey or coming to Surrey in the future. Though they will be tiered, transit orientated areas are generally going to be within 800 meters of a SkyTrain station or within 400 meters of a major bus exchange or loop. In these areas, just to make it really simple, higher density applies. There is minimum allowable heights for buildings that will be constructed in the future in these areas. If you're located within 800 meters of a SkyTrain as an example, you're looking at buildings that have a minimum of anywhere between 8 to 20 stories, and within a major bus loop, you're looking at buildings that start at a minimum of at least 8 stories and falling anywhere between 8 to 12 minimum. These areas are meant to be built around transit and amenities, helping incentivize the use of sustainable transportation. Now, I've got something you want to think about as you watch this video, and that's what happens with the existing houses in these areas that have just been rezoned. You know, what's the future of them look like, and what's it going to look like if they're ever rebuilt? Well, if you're following along, unless they meet the density requirements, they won't be rebuilt. They're going to sit there until it's time to redevelop that land in replacement of a tower. Now, this can pose huge advantages to not only people by creating more homes, but those who are selling their properties in hopes of redeveloping in these various areas, but at the detriment of the people who actually want to call these neighborhoods home and have invested likely their life savings to call these areas home. The construction of these towers are eventually going to displace those that want to live in these neighborhoods. And also, how do you ensure that you don't end up owning a home that gets stuck between 2 towers just because you love your property and decide that you want to live there rather than sell it to a developer to redevelop? Doing this obviously would completely decimate your property value if you're stuck between 2 monstrous concrete towers. This neighborhood right here, the residents here don't know it yet or what's coming. And because of no fault of their own or consultation with them, they don't know that their zoning has been completely upended. On the surface, everything seems peaceful, like it's always been. But with the new zoning regulations, this could all change, and it could happen faster than you think. And this neighborhood is one of hundreds in the city and thousands across the Lower Mainland. Now, imagine for a moment that your work isn't easily accessible by public transit. You rely on your car to get around, and you love the quiet suburban feel of this area. But what happens as this neighborhood starts transitioning under the new zoning laws? Homes like these could face years of uncertainty. As new development plans take hold, these once pristine streets might see homes becoming dilapidated because they're left in limbo while waiting for the next big project to break ground. This kind of in-between phase would mean a lot of stress on existing infrastructure. There's more cars on the street, parking congestion, a slow erosion of neighborhood charm that drew you to living here in the first place. And if you think you're safe just because you're not in one of the designated transit-orientated areas, think again. Even if you're just near a frequent bus stop like this one, the new zoning rules could still apply to you. Properties within 400 meters of a stop like this could be suddenly eligible for developments with up to 6 dwellings. The city identified several frequent bus stops in consultation with TransLink that provide 15-minute bus service for eligible lots between 281 and 4,050 meters squared located within 400 meters of a frequent bus stop. A maximum of 6 small-scale multifamily housing units is permitted as specified in each new zone, subject to certain exemptions. Approximately 13,000 eligible lots fall within this frequent bus stop area, representing around 18% of all the small-scale multi-unit housing available in the city.
So I keep mentioning parking, and why is parking such an important piece of the consideration, especially if you live in these neighborhoods or you're looking at buying into one of these neighborhoods? Well, that's because parking is pretty important. If you live in one of these transit-orientated areas near a SkyTrain or near a bus loop, or even near a frequent bus stop, there is no parking minimums. That's right, you heard that right. There is no restriction on the amount of available parking spaces on the properties that you have to park vehicles. If you live near a frequent bus stop, you could have up to 6 dwellings on a particular piece of property with 0 parking spaces. How about that 12-story tower going in down the street? There could also be 0 parking spaces. Provincial legislation now restricts a city's ability to require residential off-street parking in these areas with the aim of making housing less expensive by reducing the cost of construction. If a developer underparks a building with the expectation that the public streets around it will pick up the slack, city halls have the opportunity to use some tools to regulate the on-street parking to make sure that, whether it's time limited or whatever, that the developers aren't taking advantage of the public realm to provide parking that they are not willing to provide on their own development sites.
Picture it. What was once a single-family home could now be part of a multi-unit development, fundamentally changing the look and feel of this street. And with no parking minimums in these areas, the streets could easily become lined with cars, changing the aesthetic and feel of the neighborhood almost overnight. So whether you're in a designated zone or just near one, these changes could have a major impact on your property and your quality of life. This is why it's crucial to understand where you stand and what's coming down the line.
So the cities have a little bit of control over this, but generally speaking, you literally could have no parking for these new development properties, whether they're towers or 6 dwellings on a residential lot, coming soon to your neighborhood. Potential benefits of this might be more people using public transit or more people deciding to use their bike and adding bike lanes to the community. However, detriments might be way more congestion than what we're planning for because lack of parking, which we've seen in other areas of Surrey, where the streets simply resemble parking lots, and you're also going to have substantial increases in walk-by traffic in your neighborhood.
Here we are in what looks like an average backyard in Surrey. Peaceful, right? Under the new zoning regulations, this very property could potentially house up to 6 dwellings, all without any parking minimums. Imagine that, 6 homes on what once was a single-family lot. And if you think the changes stop there, think again. Now, if your property sides onto a transit-orientated area, you might be in for an even bigger surprise. Picture this, an 8-story building going up right next door. That's right, 8 floors minimum of a development rising up behind your backyard. These towering developments could completely change the landscape of your neighborhood, altering everything from your view to your privacy and even the amount of sunlight that your yard gets. So whether you're near a frequent bus stop or find yourself bordering a transit-orientated area, these zoning changes could bring some pretty significant transformations to your property. That is why it's so important to know exactly what's planned for your area and how it could impact your home and your lifestyle.
So if you're someone that lives in the city of Surrey, or you're someone that's looking to buy in the city of Surrey, or even the lower mainland or other areas of BC, you need to understand the property's location that you either live in or are considering and where it is located in comparison to either a SkyTrain station, a future SkyTrain station, a bus loop or future bus loop, or a frequent bus stop as identified by TransLink. And you might be a little bit careful about choosing a property located near a major corridor because it's relatively easy, likely, to add a frequent bus stop anywhere without you knowing it. You need to understand how this might affect your property's value. And there can be positive attributes to what's happening, but there can also be substantially negative attributes to what's happening. And it's not just about the money. It's also about the quality of life that you expect when you buy a home. You buy into a neighborhood with certain expectations that it's going to remain relatively the same. And with these sweeping zoning changes across the entire province, neighborhoods are going to be completely flipped upside down. So I want to make sure you can figure out whether your property is affected. And I've left links below in the description so you can look up the locations that are affected by these new announcements. And while you're down there, I would love to know what you think about these changes. They just came in July and they are now effective across the city of Surrey and most other areas of the Lower Mainland. I want to hear all perspectives, whether you are a tenant, whether you are a property owner, or whether you are somebody that is looking to move to British Columbia or specifically Surrey. And if you're unsure about how these changes might impact your own property or your plans to move to Surrey, don't hesitate to email us or reach out to us directly to see about your own personal situation. And of course, before I let you go and remind you to subscribe to our channel so you know everything you need to know about living in White Rock, BC, Surrey, BC, or anything going on in the crazy world of real estate, I want to let you know about how you can get up to 20 free admissions to our BC Home Buyers course. Over 3 hours of video content, PDF downloads, and questionnaires to help you buy a home anywhere in British Columbia like a pro and avoid all of the pitfalls that sting so many home buyers when they do it, especially when they do it for the first time. Right now, we're giving up to 20 free spots, so make sure you check the description below and get yours before they all run out. Hey, look, I hope you learned a ton today about the future fabric of the neighborhoods in Surrey and all across the Lower Mainland and into other areas of BC. Thanks for subscribing, and we'll definitely look forward to seeing you on the next video. Cheers.